Welcome into another edition of, you hear this, Jacob? Sources say
Sources say.
that here comes the boom. We're doing another compilation episode, a little montage. We did this a few months back, and I like the way it unfolded. And I also like to assert my dominance a little bit with having the headliner be Sources say. But it doesn't really matter. It's more of the fact
You are
that
so cool, dude. You're so cool.
it's more of the fact that it's the craziest time of the year. The portal is officially open for the Kentucky Wildcats and every other program in America, where the growing list of names, I believe, is pushing 2,000 now. There's never been a better time to rebuild a roster if you are in Mark Pope's shoes, where they're clearly starting from scratch. Got a couple of returning announcements there from Malachi Moreno and Cam Williams, two of arguably the biggest names that fans want specifically, and Colin Chandler, obviously the other, is kind of the top three, and then from there we'll see what happens with some of the remaining names. But up to this point, we got Jalen Lowe, Jasper Johnson, Brandon Garrison, Mo Diabate, Denzel Aberdeen throwing his hat into the ring. There's six. Who else am I missing that went portaling?
Jasper, Diabate.
Andrei Yelovich also decided to go portaling. So let's start with that before we get into the long growing list of names that Kentucky's reaching out to. I mean, it's like a growing amoeba at this point. Every time you refresh, there's a new name that
Kentucky has reached out to every single person in the transfer portal.
Yeah, every single one. So general takeaways on what you have seen from the roster decision, stay, go, the guys that you maybe expected to go, maybe any surprises, how things have unfolded here in the first couple weeks of the offseason for Mark Pope.
I think it's been pretty expected so far. I think the one that we're obviously watching most is A, Colin Chandler. He hasn't announced he's returning yet. And B, Andrei Yelovich, who has said that he's potentially considering a return. Is that the right way to put it? He's leaving the door open to a return. So that's one that I'm watching. The rest of them, it's like, yeah, this is kind of what we expected. Lowe, Garrison, Jasper, Diabate. It makes sense to see them go. And it now opens things up where Kentucky can have a very eventful portal.
Yeah, I think none of them are surprised. I think Yelovich leaving the door open the way he did, I think, was a fun, welcome surprise, because my understanding of the situation, the offseason started with Mark Pope doing all these exit meetings and follow-up meetings and just kind of saying, hey, here's what your value is on the open market. Here's how we view you in terms of our internal valuation. And there are some of you that the number is going to be too far apart, that you're going to be able to fetch way more than we are going to be willing to pay you based on how we see you. And, sorry, I think it's probably safe to include Jalen Lowe, Brandon Garrison, Mo Diabate as probably the three anchoring pieces of that. Like, hey, we're probably just not going to see eye to eye on this moving forward. But I do think that Yelovich and Cam Williams were two guys that they gave return deals to and said, we love you as basketball players, we want you back, but we're going to have to see where things go with the value. And I think Malachi Moreno and Colin Chandler also got offers, maybe didn't come in initially where they wanted to be, but I think there was some wiggle room there, and they got where they wanted to, at least on Malachi's end, and we'll see how things unfolded with Colin Chandler, but things are trending in the right direction for a return there. So Yelovich is the interesting one for me, Jacob, that I think that he's just doing that to kind of test his own market, to say, hey, what am I worth on the open market? Is what I'm asking for too ridiculous, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. Or is somebody else going to pay me above market or at market, and my time at Kentucky's over? But I do think that there's a real scenario he would prefer to be back at Kentucky if it makes sense for him. So that's one that I have not ruled out necessarily as a returning piece.
Yeah, I agree. I think it makes sense for both sides. When I gave my stay-go intel back in February, I said that the door is open depending on negotiations, and I think that's the way to put it right now. It's does it make sense for both sides? And he's now a transfer portal prospect, and he's a transfer portal prospect that Kentucky has experience with, that Kentucky's already had negotiations with, and they can continue kind of recruiting him as if he's in that list. He's on their big board, I guess. I think that's kind of the right way to look at it, where he's on that big board with some of the other targets they're going after. And if it makes sense financially for both sides, he could come back, but it could also make better sense for some other guys at that position.
I think the interesting one, like Denzel Aberdeen deciding to put his name in the portal. What's the deal with that? Like, I understand the idea that, hey, what difference does it make if I can try to apply for this the first year that he was at Florida playing, 14 games and not very many minutes, and just kind of saying, hey, let's see if I could give this a shot, because my role was essentially none year one, so maybe the NCAA will view that. But is there any chance that he gets a waiver and gets to play another season?
I don't expect it, but the reason for him entering the portal, we saw it a lot last year, is basically you want to leave your options open for if you get that waiver, because you could get that waiver in 3 weeks and Kentucky may have filled their roster by then. They don't have a spot left for you and you never enter the portal and you're just kind of stuck. So by entering the portal, you leave your options open, you get that waiver, and all of a sudden schools can start contacting you. Schools that need a guard like him can start reaching out, and you're not kind of trapped in a lose-lose scenario.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The other decisions that we are waiting on, Colin officially, publicly, and we're still waiting on his announcement. Braden Hawthorne, Reese Potter, Trent Noah. I believe those are the only ones we have left. What are you leaning on those decisions as of, April 8th at 3:18 p.m.?
Trent, I think I still lean towards thinking he'll be back, but we'll see what he values, if he can find a better role at another place. Braden Hawthorne, that's a really interesting one, because I do think there would be some schools that would be very interested in him, and I don't know what his role would look like on Kentucky's roster next year. Can he find better minutes at another school, or is he willing to continue this development track and play some bench minutes until building to a starter role? So that's one that I think maybe could go either way. I think it could go either way. Who are some of the other ones we mentioned?
Reese Potter. Is that the only other one that we're waiting on, I believe?
I think that sounds about right. I think it's just Reese Potter, and he's publicly said he wants to come back. So I don't know what the status is there. I'd expect him to be back, but we'll see. I don't expect him to play significant minutes next year if he comes back to Kentucky.
Yeah, I think that I've been prying on that one. I've been trying to see how I can help get messaging out, whatever the case was, and not totally responsive. And I think they kind of want to go do their own thing and announce when they're ready, which I think usually indicates that, they like where things stand, but also if Pope goes and adds 11 new guys and there's a 0% chance that either Reese or Trent are going to be able to play and be a part of the rotation next season, then I think that would open the door for them. So I think they're just kind of like, there's no reason in rushing an announcement until we're pretty certain where things stand. So nothing to report on either of them. I agree on both that I think they both like to be back in Lexington if it makes sense, but haven't totally just like cemented themselves back up to this point. So those are good for right now with the stay-go decisions. I think the bulk of the heavy lifting has been the heavy lifting has been done. But up to this point, Jacob, absolute chaos in terms of these guys that Kentucky's reaching out to. Every day, every hour, there is a new name that pops up on the big board, a new name that Kentucky has a Zoom meeting with, or is starting to express interest in, or whatever. But I want to start with Rob Wright, because this was probably the biggest news of the day on Kentucky's end. We both heard pretty early on in the offseason, actually dating back into the season, that was one that, there was a good chance that he was going to enter the transfer portal from BYU, a co-star with AJ DeBansa out there, I guess three-headed monster there with Richie Saunders. But that was one that there was a good chance that he would let BYU kind of get the first stab at the negotiation process. And I think my understanding of the situation is BYU gave him a number. He said, yeah, I think that's not going to do it for me. I think I'd be able to fetch more on the open market. And Kentucky was kind of waiting for that opportunity for him to hit the open market, and they will be interested officially as of like just in 30 minutes ago, officially got his name in the portal. So up to this point, it had to be expected to be interested in, expected to make contact with, but now contact can be made. What are you expecting from Rob Wright's recruitment?
A lot of money. I think he is going to garner some big time NIL offers. As we reported, this is a guy that Kentucky's had their eye on for a long time. You can see his stats right here. He put up big numbers at BYU, and he's going to be one of the highest paid point guards in the entire portal. So I've heard some schools mentioned. Ohio State was another school that came up a little bit with him, but I think Kentucky's going to be right there involved, probably getting on a Zoom pretty soon, and depending on how he plans to approach his recruitment, maybe getting on a visit. But yeah, Kentucky will be involved there, and his asking price is going to be one of the highest among those point guards in the portal.
Just for backstory, I called a couple of people that were close to Rob, and just like, all right, what's the deal with Kentucky? Is it real? Like, is Kentucky? We've heard it on our end that they would be interested, but have you gotten that vibe since entering the portal? And first thing that comes out of the mouth is do you think they'll be able to meet the asking price? Like, do you think they're going to play ball here? So that, I mean, it's just a flat out, like, that's the conversation with Rob Wright. If you want to get your foot in the door, like, you better come well equipped financially, and he's worth the price of admission. I struggle once we get into the $4 or $5+ million range. Like, that's serious cheddar for a guy who, at the end of the day, yes, Richie Saunders went down with a torn ACL, but BYU was a 6 seed with the number 1 draft pick. Like, that is something to consider. That I love him as a talent. Offensively, he's brilliant, but like, that's a real chunk of change that Kentucky's going to have to invest in. So we're going to see where things go. Kentucky will reach out. They're going to see where things go. But I think bidding war is probably the safest analogy there with Rob Wright, but not the only point guard option for Kentucky. Several massive names, and I think that's probably the biggest theme that we've noticed early, Jacob, is Kentucky is big game hunting at the point guard position, as we've reported here on whatever, both shows and on KS Board and everywhere, that Kentucky's looking for a big fish at the point guard spot. Deion Thomas, probably the biggest name outside of Rob Wright that we've heard up to this point. Deion Thomas, an awesome guard at LSU, dealt with some injury issues. Got a cleanup procedure done on his foot, limited him to 16 games. But when he was playing those 16 games, he was one of the best point guards in college basketball. Came from UNLV, where he measured out in like the 98th percentile in catch and shoot threes. So shooting wasn't where it needed to, what he wanted it to be, at 32.2% this past season. But big picture, he's a career 35% three-point shooter. And the role that he would play at Kentucky with some catch and shoot looks for him, he is elite at. So what do you think on Deion Thomas, and how serious is Kentucky for landing the LSU transfer?
Yeah, Kentucky's serious there. They're just kind of trying to figure out this point guard situation. And right now I'm told that he doesn't plan on taking visits. This is his second time in the portal. He was there last year. Kentucky was involved in that recruitment, and they've basically seen everything they've needed to see from campuses, and I expect that to move pretty quickly, given that he won't be taking visits. And that's one to keep an eye on. I think him, and then we can just kind of shift into talking about Zoom Diallo, another guy that they, no pun intended, had a Zoom with.
Zooming with Zoom about Zoom action, maybe?
Zooming with Zoom about Zoom action. That's another player that, this is one that Kentucky had involved with, had interest in back when Cal was the head coach, when he was in high school. And so he's a name that should be on Kentucky fans' radars for a little bit, and really good player out of Washington that Kentucky's got their eye on. But right now, I think that Rob Wright is kind of that top priority, and then you can kind of work from there.
I think it's Rob Wright, and then there's that tier of Deion Thomas, Zoom Diallo, who, interestingly enough, former high school teammate of one Tyron Stokes, who Kentucky is still kicking the tires on and kicking. Let's call it what it is. They're not kicking the tires. They are still very, very serious about Tyron and seeing where things go over the next couple of days as we try to nail down a commitment day for him. But that's something to keep an eye on as well. But another Zoom meeting with one Dink Pate. That is one that, man, like that dude. He's the king of Zoom meetings with Kentucky. SMU, we have heard, continues to push, led by Jason Hart. That should not be a surprise to anybody. But still, even with the NCAA kind of flirting with the idea of kind of barring anybody that has put their name in the draft and kept their name in the draft from returning to college basketball, that's a rule that I would definitely keep an eye on. But until they get the actual cutoff from the NCAA that is going to be barred, it appears that Kentucky's still going after Dink Pate. We reported last night that they had a Zoom meeting dinner time-ish last night.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the only two schools that we continue to hear, SMU and Kentucky. And it doesn't seem like anyone else is too seriously involved. So Kentucky's got one school to beat out in this recruitment. It's interesting now because I would have expected him to be committed to a school by now, just by the nature of you hurt your leverage when the portal opens. And now Kentucky's got other options that they can go for at your position. So I would have thought he would be wanting to make a quick decision. But one thing that's worth noting eligibility wise is that Kentucky, and for any school in this matter, is that Kentucky can't really start the process of getting him cleared until he commits to a school. Then once you commit to a school, you start working with the school's compliance office to get yourself cleared. So we won't have any sort of answer whether he commits to SMU or Kentucky on eligibility until after he makes that college decision.
Which is a massive risk. Like, that is something that he's not going to come cheap. Like, he does not come at a discount just because of the unknown. It is hey, you are signing up for the unknown, and you hope that the reward is worth the risk. So that is something that Kentucky is still exploring. I do think that when the options are what they are across the board, with the Zoom Diallos, with the Didon Thomas, with the Rob Wrights, like at least Kentucky at this point isn't tied down to one superstar guard and, take him or leave him with Dink. Like, maybe be able to leverage that and use that into negotiations. Well, hey, I got this other guy in hand, but I like you, but there's also a risk with you. So that's something that Pope will definitely be able to use to his advantage. But it's a risk. There's no scenario where you should just take his commitment and feel totally 100% confident that he's going to be declared eligible. That is still a massive question mark that should be kept in mind for fans. Any other guards, any other kind of on-ball guys that you should that fans need to be keeping an eye on? I know there are names that are out there, but any other priorities that you've that have kind of caught your attention here in the first 48 hours of the portal cycle?
One guy who, I don't know if you want to call him a guard, a small forward, a power forward, Neo Abdallas. That's one that Kentucky's had a Zoom with today. I think Michigan is a school that's heavily involved there, but he's a really interesting player. Then you've got, let's see here. It's a long list of guys right now.
It's unbelievable.
It's pretty unreal. But Donnie Freeman, we talked about him, or we broke the interest this morning, and Kentucky's
confirmed contact, not just interest.
Confirmed contact.
Yep.
Mark Pope leading the charge there. That's a guy that is a real NBA prospect. Like, he can I think that one really good season next year could put him on NBA radars getting into the draft. So he's a really productive player that is obviously leaving Syracuse after a coaching change. So a lot of people saw that coming when they made the change to GMAC, and now he's on Kentucky's radar. Then you've got, Devin Vanderpool, a ton of schools doing Zooms with him yesterday. And Kentucky, I believe, should have a Zoom with him pretty soon if they haven't already. So a lot of big names. The one that I want to bring up, but I don't want to bring up because his name is, I'm going to butcher his name, is Paulius Moraskis. So if I butchered your name, I'm sorry. But
Polacheck Jack Pilgrim. Let's go with that.
yeah, what Jack said. He is really good player. Obviously, went to St. Mary's. His coach, Randy Bennett, going to Arizona State. Arizona State's heavily involved there, but some big schools going after him, including Kentucky, which could make things interesting there. And I think that he would fill a big need for Kentucky in the portal so far.
Yeah, and we heard early on that Kentucky's top priorities, even before we got final decisions from Mo Diabate, Andrei Yelovich, Jalen had already made his decision, but that wasn't a surprise. But ones and fours, that was going to be the top priority. Kentucky was going to be heavily invested in those two positions, and I do think that we should include Tyron Stokes in that 3-4. He's in the conversation there. But I do think Polacheck Moskowskis, we can just roll with that one, and Donnie Freeman. Those are 1A, 1B star caliber guys there at the 4 spot. Donnie Freeman was a 5-star. Donnie Freeman was a consensus top 15 recruit, McDonald's All-American, who showed real stuff in 2 years at Syracuse. Didn't contribute to winning at the highest level, but it's a two-way street. Like, you got to have talent surrounding him, and if Mark Pope can build a contender around him, like, he has those physical tools. I mean, he's the first guy off the bus kind of guy. Like, he just looks like an absolute mammoth once he physically looks like an NBA guy, and the production is there, but still kind of putting together the stuff to kind of show off his true superstar upside, and have the platform at a place like Kentucky to be able to do so. So Donnie Freeman is definitely one that they have pushed to the top of the priority list, one that the contact has been there. We talked to him this morning, and it was funny just trying to get a feel for the other schools that were pushing hard for him and prioritizing him. And they're really, like, it was hard for him to come up with the other schools of serious interest. It was like, well, yeah, Alabama called and USC, and, the list is forever long, but Kentucky was the first that came out of his mouth, and was, there's a reason why the conversation starts with Kentucky and everybody else. I think Kentucky will be able to decide how that recruitment goes, and they're very serious about it. So we will see from there. But anything else that jumps out at you among some of these other kind of next tier of guys' names that we've heard come across over the last 48 hours?
Yeah, let's see. I mean, Terrence Brown, that's a funny one because that one got leaked through a Snapchat story.
Yeah.
The Snapchat picture with him and Pope. And I know that after he talked to Pope, he had a Zoom call with USC later that night. So that's another high scoring guard that could fill a role that I think Kentucky's going after, a lot of similar guys in that mold. And he's a pretty highly coveted player at that position, and I'm interested to see now. You get the FaceTime. Now you're probably going to get a Zoom pretty soon, and then maybe a visit if he's inclined to get on campus. So that's an interesting name that I don't think was on a lot of people's radar until pretty recently.
Yeah, unbelievable score. Some defensive issues there, and not at absolute superstar knockdown shooter, but man, he very offensively gifted and definitely a name to watch. Let's just roll through our portal tracker and just give your couple words on each guy on the ones that we haven't mentioned quite yet. Finley Bizjack at Butler. He was the first name that I think KSR reported that Kentucky would be reaching out to.
Yeah, I mean, I heard his name pretty early on that would be a player that Kentucky would be interested in. Iowa was the school that was garnering a lot of buzz early. Indiana was expected to be involved there. But we haven't heard a whole lot of Kentucky besides just being involved. So I think that's one that we'll have to see if he ends up getting on campus. This is going to be a big visit weekend. So if he ends up setting an official visit to Kentucky, then yeah, he could be one to watch.
You just heading out? All right. Sounds good. Miles Byrd, the next name on the list from San Diego State. I think, and right away, that was just hilarious. And Jacob just going to stand up and say it later. Miles Byrd from San Diego State. A lot of conversation with Lamont Butler being who he was and the impact that he made at Kentucky. Fans obviously just connected 2 and 2 about just how unbelievable he is defensively. he was rumored as a serious option for Kentucky initially, and then there since then have been quite a bit of Baylor buzz. That could be one that moves rather quickly. And yeah, hey, you're back. Appreciate that.
Lamont Butler, I was texting with him the other day.
Yeah, he's not joining the Kentucky staff, unfortunately.
Yes, he is not joining the Kentucky staff. He let me know that directly.
But we were talking about Miles Byrd.
Mm-hmm.
Does not sound like Kentucky is going to be the likely landing spot there. If I were to put my money on it, I think Baylor is probably the odds-on favorite at this stage. But one of probably at this stage the best defensive player in the portal, if at least arguably, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I think I put out an intel story on some like Friday or something saying that Baylor was trending for him. I haven't really, to be honest, checked in on that recently since I've heard Baylor. I haven't heard any real changes there. I still expect Baylor to be a heavy contender for him, but yeah, he was linked early to Kentucky, but this one seems like Kentucky may have the right read there and not go all in based on how they're approaching the guard targets.
We talked about Vanderpool, Didon Thomas, Zoom Diallo, Terrence Brown. How do we want to approach Neo?
I think we talked about him a little bit. I said Michigan is the school that's coming up a lot with him, but Kentucky's expected to make him a priority, zooming with him today. So, yeah, that's if they can get him away from the national champs, then Kentucky could have a real chance there.
KSR's own Matt Jones has been talking pretty openly, I believe, on radio even today, saying that was one that Kentucky had circled and underlined an exclamation mark as a top priority for them. I think just in general, 6'9", 215 pounds, unbelievably skilled. He was like the darling of college basketball early on. I just was doing stuff like the highlights were just unbelievable. Went viral 72 times over the course of the early parts of the season. Just like, whoa, how did this dude at this size do this? And kind of tailed off a little bit. The conference numbers definitely fell. Finished shooting 38.6% from the field, 31.4% from three. Like efficiency has to get in check there, but the tools and the potential have been just absolutely out of this world. So I think I understand the intrigue there from Mark Pope's perspective of like, man, if we can, like, he's a piece of clay, and if we just mold it in just the perfect way, that is somebody that we could potentially become a star at Kentucky, and could be one of Mark Pope's first like lottery picks coaching at Kentucky. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on. Terrence Hill Jr. at VCU and Alex Wilkins at Furman, both names that popped up later last night that we added to the tracker. Alex Wilkins, really talented player that believe the early list, Arkansas, Alabama, UConn, Houston, Kansas, Baylor, Miami, and Illinois, all of the heavy hitters going after him. But, he became a household name after going for 21 points in the NCAA tournament against UConn. Now UConn, one of the schools that are reaching out. What do you like about Wilkins at Furman? And then if you want to jump in there with Terrence Hill, who was really good, also had an unbelievable NCAA tournament performance, 34-point effort for VCU beating North Carolina in the first round.
Yeah, Wilkins is kind of one of the darlings of the portal right now. He is a guy that everyone wants, everyone is talking about. I think it's going to be hard to really narrow down the list right now. It's just going to be a ton of schools reaching out. Like you mentioned, just every big name school is involved there. So it will be interesting to see where he sets visits to, because that will be very telling to how some of these schools can differentiate themselves. And there are just so many guard targets for Kentucky right now that got to figure out which ones are serious, which ones maybe fall by the wayside. And Terrence Hill, that was who else you asked me about. Is that right? Yes.
Yep.
That one was kind of a late interest. And like I was talking to people close to his recruitment right around midnight Tuesday, and was like, hey, you guys hearing anything? Nothing yet. So that was one that they got linked to pretty late, and now they're trying to jump in the mix. But I think, honestly, I think Jack and I, we've talked about this privately. I think some of this is kind of a little bit of a diversion. They're reaching out to a lot of guys so that other schools can't recruit against them, where it's like, okay, we know Kentucky's going hard after this guy. they're spreading the board at guard targets, and then we'll start to get a real idea as we get closer to the weekend how many of these are serious and how many of these are just kind of initial reach outs.
Yeah, one of 22 schools to reach out to Hill. I mean, everybody and their mother wants the A10 6-man of the year. So, but he's a good talent. I mean, I really liked him. Didn't start for VCU, but was the team's leading scorer. Was he's going to be a top end starter for somebody next season, and 2 years of eligibility remaining. So, I am a big fan of Terrence Hill. He's proven in the NCAA tournament. You don't wake up and go for 34 in the NCAA tournament and not have some it to you. So I do like him quite a bit. I probably like him a little bit more than Alex Wilkins, but I do like both of those players quite a bit. New names that popped up there yesterday with Zoom meetings today. Anthony Robinson II from Missouri. Let's see who else we had.
Deshaun Good from Robert Morris.
Deshaun Good. And
Leo was the other one. Those were the three.
Leo, yeah. So those are the three of many Zoom meetings that happened today.
Yeah. I think, and we just got a new interest from Sam Kaiser, Kaiser Hoops, Corey Hadnot. He was
there we go.
Fort Wayne guard, all Horizon League performer, 20 points a game. That was a guy that I think announced he was entered pretty early. And so he's had a lot of schools with time to, Corey Hadnot just texted me back. So he has not set any Zoom meetings up yet, or at least with Kentucky. I'm going to shoot him a text back. If you're watching this, Corey, thanks for texting me back.
You're such an idiot. I think one of the interesting developments is the fact that Tyrone Riley IV, who early on we had heard that Kentucky was going to be a massive suitor, somebody that they were going to be 1,000% in the mix for him, almost committed to Kentucky this time last year, decided to return to San Francisco, got a bag to return to San Francisco, didn't work out the way he hoped, had a good year, but the team did not have the year that they were wanting, is hitting the portal, and we heard a ton of early interest, but then ever since the Cam Williams development, things were trending back in the right direction for Cam. Nothing with Tyrone Riley. No visits scheduled for Kentucky. So is that something that you expect to stick? Was it a one or the other deal with Cam Williams and Tyrone Riley?
That was my impression. I think that it's a natural progression there. You have Cam come back, and then you have kind of no Kentucky visit set, but other interests set. So, that makes sense. Sorry, I'm getting text now. I'm getting a text from Zach Gagan saying, Justin, FYI, I have not set any Zoom calls yet. Still talking to my agent. So we even got KSR people that are testing the waters in the portal. I'll tell you one thing, Jack and I, we are not entering the portal. We're staying with KSR. Sorry, this is all over the place. I'm getting texts right now. We're having fun. We're having a lot of fun. What do you want to talk about today?
I want to talk about Monticello Bank. I appreciate our friends at Monticello Bank for all they do, as always. But I need a second before I talk about my friends at Monticello Bank. But I do let it marinate for a little bit. Monticello Bank. We're excited to partner with Monticello Bank. Enjoy the home court advantage with Monticello Bank's HELOC special, and use the equity you built in your home to finance special home projects and improvements. Score big with a fantastic introductory rate and attractive closing costs with 21 locations in 15 counties across Kentucky. We're just around the corner, so hurry in and speak with one of our mortgage lenders about this limited time offer today. Find us on the web at mbcbank.com. Monticello Bank, where people matter. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Also, shout out to our friends at Parlor Pizza. Parlor, new location in Richmond opening this week. Make sure you go check them out, and appreciate our partnership with Parlor Pizza and all of their delicious pizza and wings and craft beers and all of happy hour, all the fun stuff there. Appreciate everything that they do as always. Start trending toward the back end of this thing. In terms of legitimate, tangible targets, guys that you would say at this stage are the top of the priority list, guys that you think that Kentucky, if we can start putting our dream rosters, dream starting fives together, give me three guys that you would say these are top options for Kentucky that I would keep a very close eye on, that you could see ending up signing with Kentucky.
First one, Rob Wright. I think that's pretty evident that he's a priority. There haven't been a ton of schools leaked with him. That's one that I would definitely say is a big priority. Let's see. I think Donnie Freeman That's another priority that fits a need that Kentucky has. He would make a lot of sense. Let's see who else. God, there are so many names. I would say another name. I'll say Zoom Diallo. It's a little bit redundant with Rob Wright, but I do think that Kentucky's in a good spot to get one of those two guys at the point guard position. I don't expect both guys to come to Kentucky, but I think that they've kind of set themselves in a good position where if they don't get Rob Wright, they'll probably be in a good spot with Zoom and can probably lock down one of them.
I think in terms of intel of talking to the people close to these recruitments and the feedback that they've gotten from Mark Pope, how do I put this politely, delicately? The feedback is much better this cycle than it was last cycle in terms of his approach and how the messaging has been and the reception on the recruit side, that it does kind of feel like he settled into his own as a recruiter. And I think selling the dream in year one was easy to do because it's Kentucky and it's like, hey, come be a part of something new. We are, come be a part of the resurgence of this new era, coming from Drexel, coming from Dayton, coming from Fairleigh Dickinson, guys who haven't been a part of this and will come be a part of this dream that we're trying to reestablish. That was an easy sell. Year two, I think because of Kentucky kind of overachieving a little bit in terms of what the talent was versus the production, winning 8 top 15 games, going to the Sweet 16 and all that. I think some of the feedback was, I don't want to say arrogance, but just kind of like you look pretty settled into this role, carrying yourself with some real confidence, but is it a little too confident with some of the feedback this time last year? Some of the feedback that we've gotten this time around is like, hey, he kind of feels some humility and was humbled a little bit by how things unfolded this year of like, all right, we know exactly the issues that we dealt with last year, like some assurance that, hey, what happened last year will never happen again. And we have the answers to the test about what not to do this time around. So that has been something that I have heard that has made me feel more confident going into some of these conversations as things ramp up with actual superstars that Pope, think is going to come in swinging and try to land some of these real top end stars in the portal.
Yeah, I think that the Keegan Brown edition has definitely helped with that. It seems like, just looking from the outside, they have a very targeted approach this offseason. I mean, it's even position wise, like you have the Tuesday, so many point guards, then you're kind of going to other positions. It's I've been impressed with how the approach has been in the early stages.
Some of the guys that we can probably rule out at this point, I think Jalen Harrelson was one that there was some early interest just because of, he's from Indiana, some ties there that could have made Kentucky a serious contender, but that I think has kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit. I'm not expecting Kentucky to be a serious suitor there. Cameron Hunter was one that was emerged early, probably falling out of, it's one of those exploratory conversations. What are you looking for? What's your number, kind of things like that. And what was that?
Still needs a waiver as well.
That's something, yeah. So anybody else that Kentucky was rumored with or that was an early contact that probably safe to take off of the target list at this point?
Brett Decker, we heard a lot of talk over the Kentucky ties. I don't expect Kentucky to be super involved there. Outside of that, there's not a huge list of guys that were kind of linked that they've like I said, they've been pretty targeted. So you haven't seen a lot of guys fall by the wayside. But I mean, Tyrone Riley, we talked about starting to set some visits and head elsewhere. So we will see this weekend who sets visits, who's going to get on campus, and how they approach some of these visits coming up.
Some other national storylines that have kind of caught my eye. Sky Clark, friend of the program, one of sources say his very first guess, deciding to re-enter the portal after wrapping up a career at UCLA. Still a guy that will need a waiver. That's an interesting storyline, knowing that he's bounced from, Illinois, Louisville, UCLA, and now back in the portal for what he hopes to be one more year of eligibility. Cameron Fletcher getting a 7th year of eligibility after starting his career at Kentucky way back when during the COVID season. So that's a feel good story for him just because he had back-to-back knee injuries out for the season. So he got his waiver, going to be able to play for a 7th season. That's cool for him. High Point making the NCAA tournament. Let's see, Chuck Martin leaving Arkansas to UNC. I think that's an interesting storyline, taking a big-time recruiter from John Calipari and going and coaching that Michael Malone staff at UNC. That is going to be a fascinating experience one way or the other. It's either going to go unbelievably well or unbelievably bad, and I don't know which one at this stage. Anything else in just some of the other speculation rumblings that have jumped out at you that has caught your attention at the national level?
Yeah, I mean, like, I haven't heard it myself, but Jack obviously talked about AJ Debance coming to Kentucky.
Shut up. Stop. Don't see. Yeah, I knew you had that little crap-eating grin on your face that you were going to do some dumb stuff. So no, he is not. No, don't put dumb stuff like that out in the ether.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like Flory Badunga, you mentioned, he's the numbers you're hearing with him are pretty nuts. A guy that is going to garner some big NIL out there. Yeah, I think outside of that, one guy who Kentucky's been mentioned with, Isaiah Johnson from Colorado. He's been kind of a national story because of all the schools getting involved there, and it seems like his recruitment is moving somewhat quickly. So he's kind of become one of the top guys that people are talking about right now.
Louisville set to host 2 of the biggest players in the transfer portal with Flory Badunga and Jackson Shellstad. So I don't love that. Really don't like that at all. So let's not do that and for both of those players. But yeah. Fun stuff. Like I said to start the show, this is going to be just a moving target where every day there's going to be a new wave of interest, guys being added to the list, being thrown off the list. So we could do one of these every single day at this point and just talk about the new names and what we're hearing and stuff like that. So any parting takes, anything that you want to get off your chest before we call it a show and prepare for the next wave?
It's just hilarious with some of the guys that I'm hearing as far as like across college basketball. I just had someone ask me what I know about Kyrie Walker, who I think I covered his high school 10 years ago.
What a blast from the past. Good grief.
Yeah, it's funny hearing some of the names that are swirling around college basketball. This is one of the craziest transfer portals that we've had, maybe the craziest we've had. And now with all the eligibility stuff, it is just funny to follow. So I'm having a fun time. Jack, I hope you are too.
I definitely am. I think just one last thing for me, like the get in price for basically all of these players is $1 million. Like $1 million for just the like back end bottom tier role players. Like if you are a contributor with a pulse, like, all right, the conversation starts at $1 million. I'm not expecting everybody to get $1 million because there are, 2,000 players in the portal and there's not $1 million for everybody to go around. So that's physically impossible. But that's like the starting point for all these agents to begin the conversation of, hey, if you want to be at the closing table with my client, you better come with 7 figures. So that has been a thing, but also the like you said, the top end guys of this class, it's basically every starting number is $3 million plus.
I wouldn't even say the top end guys. I'd say like starter level players are asking for $3 million, not necessarily even a star. It's nuts, the numbers.
And they're not all going to get it.
No.
A lot of these schools are going to laugh in their faces, but like just in terms of when you guys on the back end hear what we're talking about, when like, whoa, his number is just dumb. It's usually one of those good players that you hear he's asking for $3.5 million. Take a hike, bud. What are we doing here? So yes, that hearing that side of all of this has been absolutely fascinating.
Asking prices are not offers. Remember that.
Yeah. And even, how many do you think will actually sign in this cycle of the 2,000 names that are in there that will sign for $3 million plus?
Less than 50.
Yeah. But do you think that probably not even that many?
20? I did.
Yeah, I think 20 is a good number. Yeah.
Something around there.
But it's insane. All of this is an absolute circus. But hey, we're the animals in the circus. We're just joining in on the fun. What circus act would you be if you were a portal circus
I could swallow a sword on fire while I'm on fire. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I want to be the one in the ball with the dirt bike that just kind of goes in circles like that. That's gonna
When
be
you
me.
said cool there, I thought you were just gonna be like, cool, all right. I'm not gonna say that. But I just gonna put you on the spot.
I wouldn't do that to you. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Let's do more of these and keep them a little bit more brief. But this was a lot of fun. For Jack Pilgrim, for Jacob Polacheck, go subscribe to KSR Plus. All the intel. We dropped already several nuggets today. Make sure you subscribe right here on the KSR YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, all those things. Appreciate you guys joining us for this little matinee version of Sources Say that Here Comes the Boom. We'll be back next time.